The clinking of silverware and murmurs of polished conversation filled Le Marais, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Waiters moved like clockwork between tables of investors, socialites, and people who never looked at price tags. In that world of quiet luxury, a young waitress named Sophia Reyes balanced a tray with the grace of someone who had learned that mistakes were expensive. She stopped beside a table near the window, ready to take another order. The woman seated there was impossible not to recognize. Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore International, worth billions, her influence extending from the boardrooms of New York to the runways of Paris. Everything about her, perfectly coiffed silver hair, diamond earrings, tailored suit, spoke of precision and control. But as Sophia approached, something shifted. Eleanor's eyes fixed on the simple silver chain around the waitress's neck. Her expression froze as though the room itself had stopped breathing. Sophia felt the weight of the stare and hesitated. "Ma'am, are you ready to order?" she asked quietly, trying to keep her tone steady. Eleanor didn't answer. Her hand trembled slightly as she pointed toward the necklace. "Where did you get that?" Her voice cracked mid-sentence, breaking through the restaurant's elegant silence. A few heads turned. Sophia instinctively touched the small heart-shaped locket resting against her chest. I've had it since I was a baby," she said, uncertain why it mattered. "It's just mine." Eleanor's breath quickened. The color drained from her face. Across the room, whispers rippled like a rising tide. People who had once feared this woman's cold stare were now watching her unravel. Daniel Clark, the restaurant's manager, was already making his way across the marble floor. He knew that any disturbance involving a client like Eleanor could destroy a career. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked smoothly as he arrived at the table. "Can I get you another—" "I need to speak with her," Eleanor interrupted, her eyes never leaving Sophia. "Alone." Sophia froze. She'd worked here 6 months, saving for nursing school. This job was everything. I have other tables," she whispered. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, setting them on the table without counting. "Consider them taken care of," she said. Then, more softly, "Please, just 5 minutes." Daniel hesitated. The dining room had gone silent, cameras discreetly raised by diners pretending to check their phones. He exhaled sharply. "5 minutes," he said. "You can use my office." The walk through the restaurant felt endless. Sophia could feel the eyes on her back, the quiet judgment, the envy, the curiosity. When they entered the office, a cramped space lined with reservation books and invoices, Eleanor closed the door behind them. Her hands were shaking. "That necklace," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I gave it to my daughter 27 years ago." Sophia blinked. "Your daughter?" Eleanor nodded. She reached for her phone, scrolling through photos until she found one and held it out. The screen showed a young woman with long dark hair and bright eyes, laughing, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Around her neck gleamed a locket identical to Sophia's. "Her name was Amelia," Eleanor whispered. "My only child." Sophia stared at the image. The woman's smile felt strangely familiar, though she couldn't explain why. "What happened to her?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "She died giving birth. Complications. It was March 15th at St. Jude's Hospital in Newark. I was overseas at the time. By the time I returned, the baby—" her voice faltered. "They told me she had been adopted, privately. The paperwork was sealed." Sophia felt the air grow thin around her. "I was found in a hospital bathroom," she said slowly. "Abandoned. Same hospital, same day. They said no one ever claimed me." Eleanor's hands rose to her mouth. "A bathroom? You were found there?" Her voice broke completely. That was the day Amelia died. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound between them. The pieces began to align, and the picture they formed was unbearable. Sophia sat down hard on the edge of a chair. "You're saying I'm saying," Eleanor interrupted gently, "that necklace belonged to my daughter, and the only person who should have it is her child. Her tone trembled, but carried conviction. My grandchild. Sophia's mind spiraled. Her life, foster homes, caseworkers, nights spent wondering why she'd been left behind, suddenly tilted into something unrecognizable. That's impossible, she whispered. People don't just steal babies. Eleanor looked away, gathering strength. They do when there's money involved, she said bitterly. Amelia wasn't married. You would have been my sole heir. Someone had every reason to make you disappear. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. She had spent her life believing she'd been unwanted. The idea that she'd been stolen, that someone had taken her for profit, was worse than abandonment. You can't know that, she murmured. Not for sure. Then we'll prove it, Eleanor said, straightening, the commanding CEO returning through the haze of emotion. A DNA test. I have access to private labs. We'll get answers today. Sophia looked at her hands, rough from endless hours of work. The thought of being connected to this world, a world of diamond earrings and headlines, felt absurd. And if it's true? She asked quietly. What happens then? Eleanor met her eyes, voice steadying. Then I bring you home. Outside the office, Daniel stood pressed against the wall, listening. His pulse thundered in his ears. 27 years ago, he had been a nurse at St. Jude's, a nurse who had needed $50,000 fast, a nurse who had been told the baby would be fine, that she'd find a better life. He had believed it, or forced himself to. But that belief had never silenced the guilt. Now the past was standing in his restaurant, wearing a waitress's uniform and a stolen locket. Inside the office, Eleanor's voice softened again. You've lived without your family for so long. I can't change that. But I can give you the truth. She hesitated. Will you let me? Sophia hesitated, the locket cool between her fingers. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to protect herself from disappointment. But curiosity, stronger than fear, won. All right, she said finally. Let's do it. Eleanor's shoulders sagged in relief. Thank you. When they stepped out of the office, the restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, though the quiet glances followed them like shadows. Eleanor left without another word, escorted by her driver. Sophia returned to her shift, her body moving automatically, her thoughts trapped in a storm she couldn't name. Later that night, as she walked home through the city, Sophia touched the necklace again. The metal was warm now, as if it had absorbed her heartbeat. She had never felt so seen or so terrified. A black car trailed slowly behind her for a few blocks before turning off into traffic. Inside, Eleanor sat staring at the same photo of Amelia, whispering to herself the one truth that had carried her through 27 years of silence. She's alive. Morning sunlight slid across the tall windows of Eleanor Whitmore's penthouse, catching the silver frames that lined the walls. Every photograph told a story of achievement, stock market triumphs, gala events, political dinners, but the spaces between them whispered of absence. There were no photos of Amelia after her 23rd birthday, just a smiling young woman frozen in time. Eleanor stood before the glass, her reflection half lit, phone pressed to her ear. I don't care what it costs, she said quietly. Send the team to Midtown. Her name is Sophia Reyes. I want the DNA test done today. She ended the call before the assistant could respond. Below, New York was already awake, horns echoing through the streets, ambition pulsing in every direction. Yet for the first time in decades, Eleanor's thoughts weren't on the market or her next board meeting. They were on a girl who'd walked into her life with a $23 necklace and eyes that looked like Amelia's. Meanwhile, across the river in a cramped apartment in Queens, Sophia sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the same necklace. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph. The laughing woman with her smile, the faint dimple that appeared on the right cheek. Her roommate, Maya, was getting ready for work. You're doing that thing again, Maya said, tying her hair back, staring into the void like it's going to give you answers. Sophia exhaled. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Sophia hesitated before saying, The woman from the restaurant, Eleanor Whitmore. She thinks I'm her granddaughter. Maya paused halfway through buttoning her shirt. The Eleanor Whitmore? The billionaire who basically owns half of Manhattan? That one, Sophia said. She says this necklace belonged to her daughter, and that I'm... She couldn't finish. The words felt too heavy. It's insane, Maya frowned. Did you believe her? I don't know what to believe, Sophia admitted. Part of me wants it to be true, another part is terrified it is. Later that afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside Sophia's apartment. The driver stepped out, polite and impersonal. Miss Reyes, Mrs. Whitmore asked me to bring you to the testing facility. Sophia felt her stomach twist. She doesn't waste time, does she? She murmured as she climbed in. The lab was discreet, hidden behind tinted glass and minimalist decor. A doctor greeted them. Mrs. Whitmore, Miss Reyes, he said professionally, we can have preliminary results within 6 hours. As the technician prepared the samples, Eleanor kept her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sophia sat across from her, silent. The hum of the machines filled the air between them. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice lower now, stripped of its usual authority. You remind me of her, she said. Amelia. She used to laugh with her whole face. People always noticed that first. Sophia didn't know how to respond. I don't remember anything before the foster system, she said. Just the necklace. It's all I ever had. Eleanor looked at her with a mixture of awe and grief. Then it kept you safe, she said softly. It led you back. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that 2 lives were waiting to be rewritten. Back at the restaurant, Daniel Clark sat alone in his office. His hands shook as he poured whiskey into a coffee mug. The sound of the liquid hitting the porcelain was louder than he expected. 27 years ago, he had made a choice that had haunted every day since. He'd left the hospital that night, with the baby's cries still echoing in his ears. He whispered to himself, it was supposed to be quick. She wasn't supposed to suffer. He closed his eyes. But now the past had come knocking, and Eleanor Whitmore had the resources to kick down every locked door. The phone on his desk buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. She knows. Destroy everything. Daniel's breath caught. He typed back with trembling fingers. It's too late. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the skyline. In the testing facility, a technician entered the waiting room with a sealed envelope. Eleanor stood immediately. Sophia's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The doctor cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, Miss Reyes, the test results confirm a 100% genetic match. You are biologically related as grandmother and granddaughter. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Eleanor's knees gave slightly and she reached out as if to steady herself on the air. I knew it, she whispered. Sophia stared at the paper in the doctor's hand, as though the truth were too bright to look at directly. So it's real, she said quietly. You're my family. Eleanor turned toward her, tears streaking down her face. You're my blood, Sophia. You're all I have left. The next moments blurred into a flurry of flashes and sensations, Eleanor's arms around her, the warmth of a stranger's embrace, the faint scent of her perfume. Sophia didn't know how to react. She had imagined her mother 1,000 times, but never this, never someone powerful, fragile and desperate all at once. Later, when they stepped outside, reporters had already gathered, tipped off by someone inside the lab. Microphones pushed forward, voices overlapping. Mrs. Whitmore, is it true? Is she the missing heir? Eleanor shielded Sophia with her arm. No comment, she said sharply, guiding her into the car. Cameras flashed, capturing the contrast. The billionaire and the waitress, grandmother and granddaughter, reunited under the glare of the city. Inside the car, Sophia stared out the window as they drove through the glowing streets. They're going to turn this into a circus, she said softly. Eleanor nodded. Let them. All that matters now is that you're safe. Sophia turned to her. You really think someone stole me? On purpose? Eleanor's gaze hardened. Someone did this. Someone wanted to hurt me and they used you to do it. She paused. But I will find out who. The determination in her tone sent a chill down Sophia's spine. She wasn't sure whether to feel protected or afraid. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk surrounded by old files, Amelia's medical records, hospital reports, fragments of a life she had tried to piece together decades ago. Her assistant had brought them from storage. Most of the names meant nothing, but one stood out: Nurse Daniel Clark. She traced the name with her fingertip. "You were there," she murmured. "You saw everything." Across town, Daniel stood by his apartment window, looking down at the city lights. He had packed a bag ready to disappear again, but something in him resisted. Running had saved him once. It wouldn't save him now. He poured another drink and stared at his reflection in the glass. The years had aged him, but guilt had done the real damage. He said aloud to the empty room, "She's coming for me." Then, after a pause, almost pleading, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." The clock ticked past midnight. In the distance, a siren wailed, fading into the city's restless hum. In her penthouse, Eleanor folded her hands and whispered the same words she'd whispered every night for 27 years. "I'll find you, Amelia. I'll make it right." Now finally she had someone to fight for again. Morning came grey and heavy over Manhattan. The city that never slept was sluggish under the weight of a new story that had spread faster than the sunrise. Every major outlet carried it. Waitress discovered as Billionaire's missing granddaughter. Sophia Reyes woke to the sound of her phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. Dozens of messages, calls, and social media notifications flooded the screen. The headlines used her name, her face, and the photo of Eleanor holding her hand as they left the lab. Maya stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're everywhere," she said quietly. "It's like you turned into a myth overnight." Sophia rubbed her temples. "I didn't ask for any of this." Maya placed a mug beside her. "So what happens now? Are you moving into a mansion or something?" "I don't know," Sophia replied. "I haven't even talked to her since yesterday." But that changed an hour later when the doorbell rang. Eleanor Whitmore herself stood there, flanked by 2 discreet bodyguards. The air in the hallway seemed to tighten. Eleanor said softly, "I'm sorry for the intrusion. May I come in?" Sophia stepped aside, still half in shock. The billionaire looked smaller without the armor of cameras and makeup. She carried a paper bag that smelled faintly of croissants. "I thought you might not have eaten," Eleanor said, setting it down. Then she looked around the tiny apartment, peeling wallpaper, second-hand furniture, a life built from survival. "You shouldn't be here anymore. It's not safe." Sophia frowned. "Safe from what?" Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The people who took you, they might still be out there. I've already hired investigators." Sophia folded her arms. "You really think whoever did this 27 years ago still cares now?" Eleanor met her eyes. "They cared enough to hide you once, so I won't let them do it again." The silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed faintly. Finally, Eleanor added, "Come stay with me, just until we sort this out." Sophia hesitated. The idea of stepping into that penthouse world made her chest tighten. "I can't just leave my life behind." Eleanor's tone softened. "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to give yourself a chance to see where you came from." After a long pause, Sophia said quietly, "All right, for now." That evening, the black car carried her uptown. The Whitmore residence loomed above Central Park, glass, steel, and quiet wealth. Inside, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every surface gleamed. Yet there was warmth hidden in small details. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, old books lined neatly on shelves, a piano that looked played. Sophia followed Eleanor through the wide hallway lined with portraits. One of them stopped her in her tracks, a painting of a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Amelia. Eleanor noticed her gaze. "She was my everything," she said softly. "When she died, I thought the world ended. Then I built another one around the grief." Sophia studied the painting. "She looks like she could walk out of the frame," she said. Eleanor nodded slowly. "You have her eyes." Dinner was quiet. The clinking of silver cutlery filled the silence. Sophia barely touched her food. Her thoughts drifted between disbelief and guilt. For years she had envied families that argued over trivial things, curfews, chores, holidays. Now she had one, and it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Eleanor noticed. "You're not hungry." Sophia shook her head. "I'm just overwhelmed. Yesterday I was a waitress. Today I'm apparently an heiress. It doesn't feel real." Eleanor replied, "It's real, but you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You are who you've always been." Later that night, Sophia wandered through the penthouse unable to sleep. She paused in front of a glass cabinet where photographs of Amelia and Eleanor together filled the shelves. A small jewelry box sat beside them. Inside was another silver locket, identical to hers but tarnished with time. Eleanor appeared in the doorway wearing a silk robe. "I kept it all these years," she said softly. "I thought if I ever found you, you'd want to see it." Sophia turned to her. "How did you survive it? Losing her and then me?" Eleanor leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't," she said simply. "I became someone else, someone colder, but you've given me something back I thought I'd lost forever." Sophia looked down at the locket in her hand. "Maybe we both get to start over." Across the city, Daniel Clark sat in his darkened office at Le Marais. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the online news stories. His own name hadn't appeared yet, but it was only a matter of time. He whispered to himself, "You had to know this would happen," and drained the glass in front of him. In Eleanor's penthouse, dawn approached again. Sophia stood on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the lights fade from the skyline. For the first time, she wasn't sure whether she wanted answers. The truth had already changed everything. Eleanor joined her quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Sleep didn't come easily, I see." Sophia smiled faintly. "Too many thoughts." Eleanor handed her a cup. "Then we'll face them one at a time." A moment passed between them, quiet, tentative, almost tender. Down below, the city began to stir again, unaware that 2 generations of Whitmore women were standing side by side for the first time. Neither of them noticed the man parked across the street in a dark sedan, watching the penthouse lights through binoculars. His expression was unreadable, but his hands clenched tightly around the steering wheel as if he already knew the storm that was coming. He murmured under his breath, "It's all falling apart." Then he started the engine and disappeared into the traffic. Rain fell over the city like static that morning, washing the glass towers of Manhattan in streaks of silver. Inside the Whitmore penthouse, the world was still. Sophia sat by the window, watching drops slide down the pane, her reflection faint beside the skyline. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a shift to rush to, no uniform to iron, no manager waiting to scold her for being late. The silence felt strange, too wide, too careful. Eleanor entered the room, already dressed for the day, a phone in one hand and a folder in the other. "Good morning," she said, her tone brisk but kind. "I've been going through Amelia's records from St. Jude's. Something isn't right." Sophia turned from the window. "What do you mean?" Eleanor placed the folder on the table. "According to these, the baby, meaning you, was officially transferred to a private adoption agency the same day Amelia died. But the agency didn't exist until a year later. The paperwork was forged." Sophia frowned. "So someone at the hospital made it look like I was adopted." "Exactly," Eleanor said, "which means someone profited from your disappearance." Before Sophia could reply, the intercom buzzed. The doorman's voice came through. "Mrs. Whitmore, your investigator is here." Eleanor gestured toward the door. "Come, you should hear this too." A man in a tailored grey suit entered, rain still clinging to his shoulders. "Mrs. Whitmore," he greeted, nodding to Sophia as well. "I'm Alan Green. My team has been digging into St. Jude's hospital records." Eleanor said, "Tell us what you found." Green set a thin envelope on the table. "There was a nurse on duty that night, Daniel Clark. He left his position abruptly 2 days after the birth. No forwarding address, no contact information. He's now the manager of Le Marais." Sophia's stomach dropped. "Daniel, the manager from the restaurant?" Green nodded. "The same." Eleanor's jaw tightened. He's been under my nose this entire time, Green continued. We also found evidence of a payment made to an offshore account under his name, $50,000 deposited the day after the incident. Sophia whispered, "He sold me." Eleanor's voice hardened. "He sold my granddaughter." For a moment, the room felt too small for the rage that filled it. The sound of the rain outside seemed to dim under the weight of it. Sophia said softly, "He's been around me for months, watching me. And I never knew." Eleanor looked toward the city skyline, her reflection sharp in the glass. "He's not the only one. That money came from somewhere. Find out who paid him," she told Green. The investigator nodded. "We're already tracing it." As Green left, Eleanor turned back to Sophia. "You should stay inside until this is resolved. Promise me." Sophia met her gaze. "I don't want to hide. I've been invisible my whole life. Not anymore." Eleanor's voice softened. "You remind me of Amelia when you say things like that." Later that afternoon, Sophia wandered through the house restlessly. Every hallway seemed filled with whispers of a past she couldn't touch. She stopped in front of a framed photo of Amelia holding a violin. For a second, she imagined what it would have been like to hear her play, to have a mother who existed beyond stories and photographs. Downstairs, Eleanor was on another call. Her tone was clipped, businesslike. "I don't care what it costs," she said to Green. "I want full financial tracking on that account and get me anything on Vivian Hale." When she hung up, she caught her own reflection in the black screen of the phone. The mention of Vivian's name had tasted like iron. Vivian Hale had been her business partner, her rival, and once her closest friend. They had built Whitmore International together before Vivian's sudden resignation years ago. Vivian's death in a car crash had closed that chapter, but now Eleanor wondered if the story had been rewritten. In another part of the city, Daniel Clark was sitting in his office, a half-empty glass beside him, a folder open on the desk. His phone vibrated again, another message from the same unknown number. "You can't outrun the past, Daniel." He slammed the phone down. He muttered to himself, "I didn't outrun it. I buried it." The door creaked open. One of his assistant managers peeked in. "Sir, you all right? You look pale." Daniel forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just tired. Long week." The assistant nodded and backed out, closing the door. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain against the windows pulled him back 27 years, to the fluorescent-lit corridor of St. Jude's Hospital, the crying newborn, the deal whispered in desperation. He had told himself the baby would be fine, that someone would find her quickly, that he wasn't a monster. He whispered now, "She's grown up. She survived." But the thought brought no comfort. That night, Eleanor sat alone in her office reviewing company documents. Old board reports listed Vivian Hale as co-founder and financial controller. One line stood out, a personal transfer made to a consultant named D. Clark. She stared at it for a long time, then said under her breath, "Vivian, it was you." Her assistant entered quietly. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you all right?" Eleanor didn't look up. "No, but I will be once I finish this." Meanwhile, Sophia sat in the guest room, scrolling through photos on her phone, images of herself in the restaurant, of friends, of her life before everything changed. Every picture felt like a version of her that no longer existed. She set the phone down and whispered, "Who am I now?" The following morning, Eleanor and Sophia met with Green again. He had new information. "We traced the $50,000 transfer. It originated from an account connected to a shell company, Hale Investments." Eleanor said quietly, "Vivian's company." Green nodded. "Yes, and there's more. We found correspondence between Hale Investments and St. Jude's from that same year. It appears Vivian paid for certain hospital renovations through charitable donations right before the records went missing." Eleanor's expression was unreadable. "She orchestrated it," she said. "She wanted to destroy me. She knew Amelia was all I had." Sophia asked, "But why would she do that?" Eleanor's voice was low. "Because she wanted everything I had, my company, my reputation, my life. and she nearly got it. Green said, "There's another issue. Vivian's estate didn't close cleanly. Some of her assets were transferred to proxies, people still alive today." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll find them." As Green left, Sophia spoke softly. "You've spent your life fighting battles like this, haven't you?" Eleanor nodded. "Business teaches you to survive, but this isn't business. This is personal." That night, Eleanor stood on the balcony again, the city below like a sea of electric veins. Sophia joined her quietly. Eleanor said, "You know, Amelia was supposed to take over the company. She wanted to modernize it, make it more ethical. I never listened. I thought I knew better." Sophia replied, "And now you do." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe it took losing everything to learn what really mattered." Inside the office at Le Marais, Daniel was pacing. His reflection in the window looked like a ghost. He whispered to himself, "They're coming for me." Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a small key, the one that opened his safe deposit box at a downtown bank. Inside that box was a letter, one he had promised himself never to touch. He said aloud, "If they find me, I'll show them the truth." The next morning, Green called Eleanor. "Mrs. Whitmore, Clark's on the move. He withdrew the contents of his box this morning and left the restaurant." Eleanor's voice was calm. "Follow him. Don't intervene. I want to see where he runs." Sophia overheard the conversation and asked, "What if he's dangerous?" Eleanor replied, "He's not dangerous. He's afraid. And fear makes people sloppy." Outside, rain began again, softer this time, the kind that blurred the edges of the city. By the time evening fell, Daniel had vanished from every known address. But the letter he carried was the last piece of a story that had been waiting nearly 3 decades to be told. And far above the streets, in the quiet of her penthouse, Eleanor whispered to the night, "You can't hide forever, Daniel, not from me." The letter trembled in Daniel Clark's hands as he sat in the small, dimly lit motel room off the interstate. Rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the cheap carpet. The television flickered silently in the corner, cycling through late-night infomercials, while outside trucks roared past in the wet darkness. He unfolded the letter slowly, the paper yellowed with age and the ink slightly smudged. At the top, in elegant handwriting, was a name he hadn't spoken aloud in decades: Vivian Hale. The letter began with 4 words that made his throat tighten. "If you're reading this." He read on. Vivian had written instructions, confessions, promises of protection that never came. She had paid him to take the child and make it look like an abandonment, to ensure the baby vanished without trace. The motive had been clear: to destroy Eleanor Whitmore's stability and reputation long enough for Vivian to take control of the company. Daniel muttered to the empty room, "You didn't care what happened to the baby. You just wanted her gone." He folded the letter again and pressed his forehead against his hands. "God forgive me." In Manhattan, morning broke with grey light creeping between skyscrapers. Eleanor Whitmore sat at her dining table, a folder of documents spread before her. Her investigator, Alan Green, stood nearby. She asked him, "Where was Clark last seen?" Green replied, "A motel off Route 9, but he left an hour before we arrived. He emptied his deposit box. We're tracking him through his credit card." Eleanor nodded slowly. "He's running out of time." Sophia entered the room still in a robe, her hair tied back. "You're not going after him, are you?" she asked. Eleanor looked up. "If I have to." Sophia's voice trembled. "You're talking about hunting a man who was part of a crime. Isn't that something the police should handle?" Eleanor's reply was quiet but firm. "The police didn't care 27 years ago. They won't care now unless I force them to." Sophia took a seat across from her. "You can't fix the past by breaking someone else," she said. Eleanor studied her granddaughter's face. "I'm not breaking him. I'm confronting him. There's a difference." Across town, Daniel met a man in a parking garage. The man's face stayed in shadow, his voice low and impatient. "You kept the letter," he said. Daniel answered, "She told me to. Said it was insurance. You think I'd destroy the only thing keeping me alive?" The man stepped closer. "If Whitmore gets that letter, we're all finished. You understand me?" Daniel backed away slightly. I'm not handing it over to her. I just want to disappear." The man's voice hardened. "Then disappear properly." As Daniel turned to leave, the man added, if you so much as whisper her name, you'll regret it." Daniel walked into the rain, heart pounding. He knew he couldn't run forever. Not from Eleanor. Not from his conscience. That afternoon, Eleanor received a call. Green's voice on the line was calm but urgent. "We found him. He's on his way to Penn Station, likely heading south." Eleanor stood. "Send me the address." Sophia, who had been nearby, heard everything. "You're going after him yourself?" Eleanor's tone left no room for argument. "Yes." Sophia followed her to the door. "Then I'm coming with you." Eleanor hesitated. "You don't need to see this." "I need to understand it," Sophia said. Minutes later, the Whitmore car sped through the city, raindrops streaking across the windows. Neither spoke for most of the ride. Finally, Sophia said quietly, "What will you do when you find him?" Eleanor kept her gaze forward. "Ask him why." At Penn Station, crowds moved like restless tides beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Eleanor and Sophia entered the terminal, scanning faces. Green stood waiting near one of the pillars. "He's on platform 3, he said. Eleanor walked ahead, her steps measured but quick. Daniel was standing near a vending machine, clutching a duffel bag. When he saw her, his expression crumpled. She stopped a few feet away. "Daniel Clark," she said evenly. "You've had 27 years to prepare for this conversation." Daniel's voice came out hoarse. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." Eleanor stepped closer. "You took my grandchild. You left her in a hospital bathroom like she was nothing." He shook his head. "I thought someone would find her. I thought she'd be safe. I was desperate. Vivian, she said it would be easy money, that no one would get hurt." Eleanor's tone cut through his excuses. "My daughter died that night, and my granddaughter grew up in foster homes. Tell me, Mr. Clark, what part of that sounds harmless to you?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I can't undo it. I live with it every day." Sophia stepped forward then. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You watched me work in that restaurant. Did you recognize me?" Daniel's answer was almost a whisper. "Yes. The first day you walked in." Sophia's voice hardened. "And you said nothing?" He met her gaze for a brief second before lowering his eyes. "What could I say? I thought if I left it alone, the truth would stay buried." Eleanor extended her hand. "The letter, Daniel." He hesitated, then pulled it from his jacket pocket. "It's all there. Everything Vivian planned. Names, payments, dates." Eleanor took it, her fingers trembling slightly. "You've already destroyed yourself, Daniel. Now the truth will finish the rest." As security approached, Green signaled quietly, and Daniel was taken into custody. He didn't resist. As they led him away, he said over his shoulder, "Vivian's dead, but others knew. She wasn't the only one." Eleanor watched him disappear into the crowd. Sophia turned to her. "What now?" Eleanor folded the letter carefully. "Now we find every last person who helped her." That evening, back in the penthouse, Eleanor spread the contents of the letter across her desk. Vivian Hale's signature appeared on multiple pages, along with detailed notes outlining how she had paid hospital staff to falsify records and redirect funds. One note caught Eleanor's eye. "Ensure the nurse is taken care of. If problems arise, make sure he can't be traced." Eleanor whispered, "You always covered your tracks, Vivian." Sophia stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. "So she did this to destroy you, to take your company?" Eleanor nodded. "And she almost succeeded." Sophia asked, "What happens to him now? To Daniel?" Eleanor's expression was unreadable. "Justice will handle him, but I'll handle everyone else." Outside, thunder rolled through the city, echoing off the tall buildings. The rain had turned heavier, drumming against the glass like distant applause. Eleanor closed the folder and said quietly, "The silence is over." Sophia looked at her grandmother and saw not just power, but something else, a resolve that bordered on vengeance. She said softly, "Don't lose yourself to this." Eleanor met her eyes. "I already lost too much not to finish it." The two women stood there, the city's reflection stretching around them, knowing that what came next would change everything again. The courtroom was colder than Sophia expected. The marble floors, the distant echo of footsteps, the stiff rustle of papers, everything felt detached from the human cost of what had happened. Yet at the center of it all sat Eleanor Whitmore, expression carved from stone, her posture unyielding. She had waited 27 years for this moment. Daniel Clark sat across the room at the defense table, his shoulders hunched, hands clasped tightly. He looked smaller than Sophia remembered, like a man crushed beneath the weight of his own choices. When the bailiff called the session to order, the murmurs in the gallery fell silent. The district attorney stood and began outlining the charges: conspiracy, falsification of medical records, child endangerment, and fraud. Each word struck like a hammer. Eleanor didn't flinch. Sophia sat beside her, fingers laced together in her lap, heart pounding. When the prosecution presented the letter signed by Vivian Hale, the room seemed to draw a collective breath. The document detailed everything: the money trail, the forged adoption papers, and the names of those who had participated. Vivian had been dead for years, but her signature now spoke louder than her voice ever could. The prosecutor said, "The evidence is irrefutable. This was not an accident. It was a calculated act designed to inflict emotional and financial harm on Mrs. Whitmore by stealing her grandchild." Daniel's lawyer rose to respond. His tone was measured. "My client admits his role, but we must acknowledge context. He was under immense financial pressure, manipulated by a woman of considerable power. He has cooperated fully since the investigation began." Eleanor's gaze didn't move from Daniel. She said softly, just loud enough for Sophia to hear, "Cooperation doesn't erase what he did." Sophia turned toward her. "Neither does hatred," she whispered. The proceedings dragged on for days. Witnesses testified: former hospital staff, accountants, corporate assistants. Some cried, some lied. But slowly, a full picture emerged. Vivian Hale had used her influence and money to orchestrate a disappearance that had shattered multiple lives. On the fourth day, Daniel was called to the stand. The prosecutor's voice was steady. "Mr. Clark, why did you agree to take the child?" Daniel's answer came after a long silence. "Because I was desperate," he said. "I had gambling debts. Vivian promised me $50,000 and told me the baby would be adopted by a good family. I believed her. I wanted to believe her." He paused, his voice shaking. "When I realized what I'd done, it was too late." The prosecutor asked, "And when you recognized her years later working in your restaurant, why didn't you tell anyone?" Daniel stared down at his hands. "Because I was a coward." Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her grip on the edge of the bench tightened until her knuckles turned white. Sophia glanced at her grandmother, feeling the tension coil between grief and fury. When the defense rested, the judge adjourned for a short recess. Eleanor stepped outside into the courthouse hallway. The building's old walls smelled faintly of dust and rain. Sophia joined her. Eleanor said quietly, "I thought justice would feel different." Sophia asked, "What does it feel like?" "Like standing at the edge of a grave," Eleanor replied. Later that afternoon, the judge delivered the verdict. Daniel Clark was found guilty on all counts. He would serve 15 years in federal prison. The courtroom murmured, reporters scribbled, and cameras clicked. Eleanor remained motionless, her expression unreadable. When Daniel was led past her in handcuffs, he stopped for a moment. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. For everything." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes sharp but not cruel. "You're sorry because you were caught," she said. "Be sorry for the years you stole." Then she turned away. Outside, rain had begun again. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Microphones were thrust toward Eleanor as flashes burst like lightning. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have a statement? Will you be seeking further charges against the estate of Vivian Hale?" Eleanor stopped at the top of the stairs and faced them. "Justice doesn't end with a single verdict," she said clearly. "It ends when every person who profited from this crime is held accountable." The crowd shouted more questions, but she continued down the steps without another word. Sophia followed close behind, the sound of their heels echoing against the stone. In the car, Sophia spoke first. "You did it. He's going to prison." Eleanor's eyes stayed on the window. Prison is the least of what he deserves. But this was never just about him. Sophia frowned. "Then what is it about now?" Eleanor turned toward her. "Restoration. Of truth, of legacy, of dignity. And maybe, if I'm lucky, of peace." For a moment, neither spoke. The car moved quietly through the grey city streets. People outside hurried beneath umbrellas, unaware that inside the passing limousine sat a woman who had just avenged 3 decades of silence. That night, news channels across the country ran the story. Headlines read, "The Whitmore Case, Justice After 27 Years." Talk shows debated Eleanor's motives. Some called her relentless, others called her heroic. But for Eleanor, the attention meant nothing. She spent the evening in her study, alone, rereading the letter one last time before locking it away. Sophia entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You should rest," she said. "You've been at this for days." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You sound like your mother." Sophia set a cup beside her. "You mean Amelia?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes. She was like that, always telling me when to slow down." She looked at Sophia for a long moment. "You remind me of her, not just in the way you look, but in the way you speak truth, even when it hurts." Sophia hesitated. "She would have been proud of you." Eleanor's voice softened. "I hope so, though I suspect she would have told me to forgive sooner." Silence settled between them again, broken only by the soft tapping of rain against the windows. Finally, Sophia asked, "What happens now after all this?" Eleanor looked around the room at the walls lined with photographs of Amelia, at the city beyond the glass. "Now," she said, "we decide what to build out of the ruins." The next morning brought a calm the city hadn't seen in weeks. Reporters moved on to new scandals. The courthouse emptied and the noise began to fade. But inside the Whitmore penthouse, change was already taking shape. Eleanor had called a meeting with her attorneys, not to pursue more lawsuits, but to establish a foundation. When one of them asked, "What kind of foundation, Mrs. Whitmore?" she answered without hesitation. "One that protects children who fall through the cracks, a place for the ones no one claims." Sophia, listening from across the room, smiled faintly. "You're turning justice into hope," she said. Eleanor replied, "Justice without compassion is just revenge." And for the first time in years, she looked at peace. 3 months had passed since the trial. Spring returned to New York with cautious warmth, and the air outside the Whitmore Foundation headquarters smelled faintly of tulips and rain. The glass doors gleamed with a new inscription, "The Amelia Whitmore Foundation, for every child forgotten." Inside, journalists gathered in a spacious atrium lined with photographs, images of foster families, hospitals, and smiling children. The stage was simple: a single podium, a modest banner, and 2 women standing side by side. Eleanor Whitmore in an ivory suit, dignified as ever, and Sophia Reyes, who now carried her new name with quiet confidence, Sophia Whitmore. As the cameras flashed, Sophia stepped to the microphone. "When I was little," she began, "I used to imagine that somewhere out there, someone was looking for me. I didn't know her name or her face. I just knew that if I kept hoping, I wouldn't disappear completely." Her voice was calm but full of weight. "That hope led me here. This foundation isn't just about me, it's about every child who waits in the dark for someone to remember them." She paused, scanning the crowd. "My mother, Amelia Whitmore, dreamed of becoming a doctor. She wanted to dedicate her life to healing people. I never met her, but I like to think this is how I honor her dream, by healing something that's been broken for far too long." At the edge of the stage, Eleanor watched her granddaughter speak. The pride in her eyes was unmistakable, though her expression remained composed. When Sophia finished, the applause filled the room like a rising tide. When the noise quieted, Eleanor took her place at the microphone. I have spent much of my life fighting for power, for control, for wealth, she said, her voice steady, but none of it brought meaning until I found what I had lost. Family is not about bloodlines or inheritance. It's about responsibility, what we do for those who cannot fight for themselves. The cameras clicked rapidly, but Eleanor's gaze stayed on Sophia. For 27 years, the world told me to move on, to forget. But I refused, and because I refused, she is here today. So I ask all of you, never stop searching for the truth no matter how long it hides. The applause returned, softer this time but more emotional. Journalists wiped their eyes discreetly. Outside, the sky cleared, sunlight spilling through the tall glass windows. Later that afternoon, the crowd dispersed, and the building fell quiet. Eleanor and Sophia stood alone in the exhibition hall where a small glass case had been installed. Inside it, resting on a white velvet stand, was the silver necklace, the locket that had started everything. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In memory of Amelia Whitmore, in honor of every child who finds their way home," Sophia said quietly. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." Eleanor looked at the necklace. "Neither can I. That something so small could carry so much weight." Sophia turned to her. "Do you ever think about her? About my mother?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Every day. I used to think of her as a ghost, something I could never reach. But now when I look at you, it's like she's here again." Sophia smiled faintly. "Tell me more about her." Eleanor's eyes softened. "She was stubborn, brilliant, always fighting for people who didn't have a voice. She used to sneak stray animals into the house, insisting she could take care of them. She wanted to help everyone, even when she couldn't help herself." They stood in silence for a moment, both lost in the same thought, that Amelia's compassion had somehow survived through them, reaching across time and tragedy. Eleanor finally said, "You have her strength, but you've built your own path. She would be proud." That evening they returned to the penthouse. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the balcony. Sophia sat on the sofa, flipping through a photo album Eleanor had compiled. Amelia as a child, Amelia at university, Amelia pregnant and glowing. Eleanor sat beside her, a cup of tea in hand. "She sent me that last picture a week before she went into labor," Eleanor said. "She was nervous but excited. She said, 'Mum, I'm going to love this baby enough for 2 people.'" Sophia traced the edges of the photograph with her finger. "She did," she said softly, "even if she never got the chance." Eleanor reached out and took Sophia's hand. "And now, I have that chance. Maybe it took too long, but it's ours now." The clock ticked quietly in the background. Outside, the city glowed with 1,000 lights, buildings, bridges, streets alive with people. Somewhere below, a car horn echoed, a reminder that life went on, messy and unpredictable. Sophia said, "Do you ever regret it, building everything the way you did? The company, the empire?" Eleanor leaned back, thinking, "I used to think success would protect me, that if I became untouchable, I couldn't be hurt again. But I was wrong. The walls I built to keep the pain out also kept out the joy." She looked at Sophia. "You helped me see that." Sophia smiled. "I didn't do anything." "You existed," Eleanor said simply. That was enough. For a while they said nothing. The city below flickered like a heartbeat. Later that week, the foundation began its work in earnest. Sophia visited hospitals, spoke with nurses, and reviewed protocols to prevent newborn misidentification. She moved with quiet determination, never flaunting her new name, only using it when necessary. People respected her, not because of her lineage, but because of her sincerity. One afternoon, after a meeting with city officials, she stood outside looking up at the skyline. A group of children from a nearby foster home were being guided through the foundation's new mentorship program. One of them, a girl no older than 8, tugged at Sophia's sleeve and asked, "Did someone ever find you too?" Sophia crouched down so they were eye level. "Yes," she said. "Someone found me after a long, long time." The girl smiled. "Then maybe someone will find me too." Sophia felt her throat tighten. "I think they will," she said. "And until they do, we'll make sure you have everything you need." Back at the penthouse, Eleanor watched the news coverage of the Foundation's launch. Reporters praised its mission, calling it one of the most impactful philanthropic initiatives in recent years. She turned off the television and looked out over the city. When Sophia returned home that evening, Eleanor said, "You've changed more lives in 3 months than I did in 30 years. Sophia laughed softly. "You built the foundation." "I just work there." Eleanor shook her head. "You gave it purpose, I gave it structure. The two aren't the same." That night, they dined together in quiet contentment. The conversation drifted between work, memories, and the small joys of ordinary life. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt something she hadn't known she was missing: peace that didn't demand victory. Before going to bed, Sophia stood by the window, looking out at the city that had once felt so indifferent. She whispered to herself, "We found our way back." From across the room, Eleanor's voice broke the quiet. "What was that?" Sophia turned with a small smile. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." Eleanor smiled back. "Then keep thinking. The world needs dreamers." As the night deepened, the two women sat together in the glow of the city lights, the grandmother who had refused to give up, and the granddaughter who had refused to be forgotten. And somewhere in that vast city of millions, a small child in a foster home slept with a new sense of hope, unaware that her story had already begun to change, because two women decided that love could still win, even after everything. The first snow of winter came early that year. The city that had once felt like a battlefield to Eleanor Whitmore now looked almost gentle under a blanket of white. Inside the penthouse, the fireplace burned low, casting soft orange light across the room. Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair with a blanket over her knees, her silver hair undone for once, her expression calm but distant. Sophia entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You've been staring out that window for an hour," she said, as she handed one to her grandmother. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Old habits. I used to sit here and count the lights, wondering which of them belonged to someone happier than me." Sophia sat on the arm of the sofa, sipping her drink. "And now?" she asked. Eleanor turned from the window. "Now I just think about how lucky I am to still see them." For a moment the silence between them was comfortable. The fire crackled, and the city hummed softly below. Sophia said, "The board approved the expansion today. We're opening a branch of the foundation in Chicago by next spring." Eleanor's eyes brightened. "That's wonderful news." "It's your legacy," Sophia said. "Every program we build, every child we place, it all started because you refused to stop looking." Eleanor reached over and touched her granddaughter's hand. "It started because of a mistake that should never have happened. But yes, I suppose something good finally grew from it." Sophia hesitated before speaking again. "Have you ever forgiven him? Daniel Clark, I mean." Eleanor stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Forgiveness isn't something I hand out easily. But I think about him, about what kind of desperation makes someone sell a life for money. Maybe forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me." Sophia nodded. "I think you've already done that, even if you don't say it." Eleanor looked at her, the corner of her mouth lifting. "You sound like Amelia." The mention of Sophia's mother always changed the air slightly, as if both women were listening for a ghost. Later that evening, Sophia left for a foundation dinner, leaving Eleanor alone with her thoughts. She walked to her study and opened a drawer where a small stack of letters rested, Daniel's letter of apology among them. She unfolded it, her hands steady now. He had written, "I can't undo what I did. I know you have every right to hate me, but I hope someday you'll understand that I hated myself more." She whispered to the empty room, "I understand." Eleanor placed the letter back in the drawer and closed it gently. For the first time, it didn't feel like a wound. The next morning, Eleanor joined Sophia at the foundation office. The building buzzed with quiet energy, phones ringing, volunteers chatting, the scent of coffee and printer ink in the air. On one wall hung a new photo of Amelia, her smile radiant, with a quote beneath it, "No one is lost forever." As Eleanor entered, Sophia was finishing a call. She looked up and smiled. The senator confirmed his support for the new foster care bill. We're one step closer. Eleanor nodded, pride softening her features. Your mother would have been proud of you. Sophia replied, You're the reason I can do this. They walked together through the offices, greeting staff members who looked at Eleanor with admiration. Though she never sought attention, her presence carried quiet authority, the kind that didn't demand respect, but earned it. Later that afternoon, a familiar name appeared in the news: Daniel Clark. A journalist reported that he had been transferred to a low-security facility and had started teaching literacy classes for inmates. The segment showed a brief photo, older, grayer, but alive. Sophia turned off the television and looked at Eleanor. He's trying to make amends, she said. Eleanor's voice was even. Then let him. Sophia asked, Would you ever speak to him? Eleanor shook her head. No. Some chapters don't need words to end. But I'm glad he's found a way to be useful. Perhaps that's his form of grace. That evening they attended a gala for the foundation's donors. The ballroom shimmered with gold and glass. But for Eleanor, the most striking thing wasn't the wealth. It was seeing people talk about compassion, like it was fashionable again. During dinner, a young journalist approached their table nervously. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, may I ask you something off the record? Eleanor nodded. Go ahead. He hesitated, then said, After everything that happened, the trial, the scandal, the years you lost, do you ever wish you'd never found out the truth? Eleanor looked at him for a long moment before answering. Truth hurts, she said, but lies rot you from the inside. I'd rather live with pain than with poison. The journalist nodded slowly. That's powerful. Thank you. As he walked away, Sophia leaned toward her grandmother. That was a headline waiting to happen. Eleanor smiled faintly. Let it. Maybe someone who needs to hear it will read it. Weeks later, snow covered the city in silence. Eleanor and Sophia spent Christmas Eve together at the Foundation's Children's Center, where a small tree twinkled in the corner and laughter filled the room. Sophia helped a group of children decorate cookies while Eleanor sat nearby, handing out ribbons and watching them. One boy, about 7 years old, approached Eleanor and asked shyly, Are you the lady who helps people find their families? Eleanor smiled warmly. Something like that, she said. But sometimes they find me first. The boy thought for a moment. That's lucky, Eleanor nodded. Yes, it is. When Sophia came over, flour dusted across her sleeves, she laughed. You've been adopted by half the room already. Eleanor glanced around at the children playing, their laughter echoing against the walls. I think I'm fine with that, she said. As the night ended, they stood outside together, snowflakes catching in their hair. Sophia said quietly, You look happy. Eleanor replied, I am. Happiness feels lighter when you've carried grief long enough to know its weight. They began walking toward the car, the city lights glowing softly through the snowfall. Sophia said, You once told me that wealth means nothing if you're alone. Do you still believe that? Eleanor smiled. More than ever. The only fortune worth keeping is the one you share. When they reached the car, Eleanor paused and looked back at the foundation building, its windows glowing like lanterns in the snow. It's strange, she said, how something born from tragedy can become a home for hope. Sophia took her arm gently. That's the weight of grace, she said. Eleanor looked at her, proud and at peace. Then let's carry it together. As the car pulled away, the lights of the city blurred in the falling snow. For the first time in decades, Eleanor Whitmore wasn't haunted by what she had lost, but comforted by what she had found, a granddaughter, a legacy, and a world slightly better than before. And somewhere, in a quiet prison classroom, Daniel Clark stood before a group of men reading aloud from a children's book. His voice shook at first, but then steadied. When one of the inmates asked why he cared so much about teaching, Daniel answered simply, Because someone once gave me a second chance, even if she never said it out loud. Back in Manhattan, Sophia hung a new ornament on their Christmas tree, a small silver locket, identical to the one that had started everything. It caught the firelight as she whispered, "For her. For all of them." Eleanor, watching from her chair, smiled softly. "For us," she said. The city outside shimmered with quiet promise, and in that fragile peace, the story of pain and redemption finally came to rest. The city had changed again by the time spring came back around. Billboards that once displayed headlines about the Whitmore scandal now carried the Foundation's emblem, a silver heart on a field of blue. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that the truth, once unearthed, could still grow into something living. Sophia Whitmore stood on the steps of the new Children's Hospital wing that bore her mother's name, the Amelia Whitmore Center for Pediatric Care. A light breeze stirred her hair as she looked up at the gleaming glass facade. Crowds had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, donors, politicians, doctors, and families whose lives the Foundation had touched. Eleanor approached from behind, her pace slower these days, but her presence as commanding as ever. "I almost can't believe it," she said, her voice carrying a trace of wonder. Sophia turned to her. "You always said she wanted to be a doctor. Now she'll heal people in a different way." Eleanor smiled faintly. She would have liked that. Reporters called their names, asking for quotes, for statements, for smiles. They obliged briefly, then slipped inside once the ceremony ended. The hall smelled of new paint and disinfectant, but the walls were already decorated with children's drawings, hearts, suns, stick figures holding hands. Sophia said quietly, "Every time I walk into a place like this, I think about what could have happened if no one had found me." Eleanor stopped walking. "Don't dwell on what didn't happen. You survived. You turned pain into purpose." Sophia replied softly, "You taught me how." For a moment, Eleanor looked at her granddaughter the way a woman might look at a sunrise she never expected to see again, bright, warm, and slightly unreal. That night, the two women sat on the balcony of the penthouse, the city below humming with its usual restless rhythm. The skyline glittered like a constellation of memories. Eleanor said, "I had a dream about Amelia last night." Sophia turned to her. "What was it about?" Eleanor's voice carried a softness rarely heard. "She was standing on a beach holding a child's hand. I couldn't see the child's face, but I knew it was you. She looked at me and said, 'It's time to stop looking backward.' When I woke up, I felt lighter." Sophia smiled. "Maybe it was her way of saying goodbye." "Maybe," Eleanor agreed. "Or maybe it was her way of saying thank you." The city's lights shimmered on Eleanor's face, highlighting the lines time had drawn there. For all the years of steel and composure, she finally looked at peace. Sophia said, "You know, when I first met you, I was terrified. You were everything I wasn't. Rich, powerful, untouchable. I thought I'd never fit into your world." Eleanor looked amused. "And now?" "Now," Sophia said, "I think maybe it's our world." Eleanor laughed softly. "You sound just like your mother when she used to win arguments with me." Sophia teased, "So it runs in the family." The laughter faded into comfortable quiet. The night wind carried the distant sound of traffic, the hum of a living city, something both women had learned to love again. Weeks later, Sophia traveled to Washington to testify before Congress in support of a national foster care reform act inspired by the Foundation's work. Eleanor watched the broadcast from her living room, surrounded by framed photographs of Amelia and Sophia. On screen, Sophia's voice was calm and unwavering. "I grew up in the foster system," she said. "I know what it feels like to be forgotten, but I also know what it feels like to be found. Every child deserves that chance." When the hearing ended, Eleanor turned off the television and sat in silence for a long moment. She whispered, "You did it, my girl." Later that day, she called Sophia. When her granddaughter answered, Eleanor said simply, "You made me proud today." Sophia laughed on the other end. "That means more than you think." Eleanor replied, "I think it means everything." As summer approached, Eleanor began spending more time at her country estate outside the city, a quiet place surrounded by tall oaks and slow rivers. Sophia often joined her on weekends, escaping the endless meetings and press attention. One afternoon they walked through the gardens, where roses bloomed in wild abundance. The air smelled faintly of rain. Sophia said, "It's beautiful out here, peaceful." Eleanor nodded. "It used to feel empty to me. Now it feels full again." Sophia smiled. "Maybe because you're not alone anymore." Eleanor stopped by a small bench overlooking the water. "Do you know, when I first built this place, I thought it would be a retreat from the world. But I think what I really wanted was a place where I could pretend the world didn't hurt me." Sophia sat beside her. "You don't need to pretend anymore." Eleanor looked at her and said softly, "No, I don't." They sat in silence, listening to the gentle rush of the river. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in gold and violet. Months later, the Foster Care Reform Act passed unanimously. The Amelia Whitmore Foundation received national recognition, donations poured in, and similar initiatives began appearing across the country. The story of the stolen child who became an advocate for the forgotten touched millions. During a televised interview, a journalist asked Sophia, "What drives you to keep doing this work?" Sophia thought for a moment before answering. "Because somewhere out there, another child is waiting in the dark, and I know what that feels like. I can't rest until they're found." When the interview aired, Eleanor watched it with tears she didn't bother to hide. She said quietly to herself, "Amelia, she's everything you dreamed she'd be." That winter, Eleanor's health began to falter. The doctors called it age and exhaustion, but Sophia knew it was more than that. Her grandmother had spent a lifetime fighting battles, and now she was finally ready to rest. One evening, Eleanor sat by the fire, a blanket over her shoulders, as Sophia read reports from the foundation aloud. When Sophia finished, Eleanor smiled and said, "You don't need me there anymore." Sophia protested gently, "Don't say that." Eleanor's tone was tender. "It's true. You've built something that doesn't depend on me. That's how I know it will last." Sophia felt tears press against her eyes. "I wouldn't be here without you." Eleanor shook her head. "You would have found your way, just like you always have." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and said, "Promise me something." Sophia took her hand. "Anything," Eleanor said quietly. "When it's your turn to let go, do it with grace. Don't carry the past like armor. Let it teach you, then set it down." Sophia nodded, her voice breaking. "I promise." Eleanor smiled, the faintest glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Good girl." Outside, snow began to fall again, silent and slow. The following morning, Sophia found her grandmother still in her chair by the fire, peaceful, a soft smile on her lips. In her hand was the silver locket. The world mourned Eleanor Whitmore as a titan of industry and philanthropy. But for Sophia, she was something else entirely. A compass, a second chance, the proof that love could find its way through impossible darkness. Months later, standing before a sea of faces at a memorial gala, Sophia spoke to the crowd. "My grandmother used to say that truth always finds a way. I think she was right. But what she never said, what I learned from her, is that love does too. And when truth and love walk together, they change everything." The applause that followed was soft but endless. That night, Sophia returned home to the penthouse. She placed the locket beside Amelia's photo and whispered, "We're all together now." The city outside pulsed with life, neon lights flickering against the glass. And though the night was cold, the world felt warm again. Proof that even after loss, even after years of silence, something beautiful could still echo forward into tomorrow. Chapter 10. The Light That Remains. Approx. 200 words. Morning found the city washed clean by rain, glass and steel catching the pale sun like quiet mirrors. Sophia Whitmore stood at the penthouse window with the silver locket in her palm, feeling the familiar weight settle against her skin. The apartment was different now, softer, quieter. Eleanor's chair remained by the fireplace, a folded blanket on its arm. Nothing had been moved, nothing needed to be. memory had its own careful order. She said to the empty room, "I'm heading out, Grandma," and let the locket slip back against her collarbone. Down on the street, the driver opened the door and nodded. "Miss Whitmore," he said simply. She returned the nod and watched the city slide past as the car turned toward the river, toward the hospital that had bound her past and future together like two sides of the same coin. St. Jude stood newer than the stories in her head, its entrance bright, its lobby full of ordinary life, coughs, footsteps, the hush of elevators closing. She crossed the floor to a plaque mounted on the wall. The inscription read, "In honor of those who seek the truth." Beneath the words, small engraved lines named benefactors and advocates. One of the names was Eleanor's. The other, added last month, was Amelia's. A volunteer approached with a gentle smile. "Can I help you find someone?" Sophia returned the smile. "I'm visiting the neonatal unit. I have a meeting with the charge nurse." They took the elevator to the 4th floor. The corridor smelled faintly of soap and something sterile and kind. A nurse in scrubs waited by the desk, hands folded, eyes kind. Her badge read N. Patel. Nurse Patel said, "Ms. Whitmore, thank you for coming. We're honored to have the Foundation's support." Sophia nodded. "I'm the one who's honored. This place is where my story went wrong, and where it can start going right for others." They walked the hallway together. New protocols were posted beside each doorway. 2-person verification, dual banding of infants, checklists that left no room for ambiguity. Through a window, tiny lives slept in clear cradles, their chests rising and falling in patient rhythm. Nurse Patel said, "When you visit, the staff stands a little straighter. They know why this matters." Sophia said, "Please tell them they're the reason it works." They stopped at an alcove where a small exhibit displayed the hospital's early history, sepia photographs, names and dates, fragments of a long, complicated memory. An older woman stood there quietly reading. She wore a cardigan buttoned to her throat, her hands neat and still. When she looked up, her eyes softened with recognition. The woman said, "You're Sophia Whitmore?" Sophia offered a careful smile. "Yes." The woman exhaled slowly. "I was a nurse here the night your mother died." She lowered her gaze for a moment, then found the courage to meet Sophia's eyes. "I tried to find you. We all did. We were told you'd been placed quickly with a family. We were told so many things." Sophia felt the air shift around them. "What is your name?" she asked. "Evelyn Ross," the woman said. "Retired now. I come back sometimes to remember the right things." Sophia studied her face, not searching for guilt but for something older and deeper. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Evelyn swallowed. "I'm sorry we didn't know. I'm sorry we believed what we were told." Sophia answered softly, "I don't hold you responsible for the lies someone else paid to tell." Evelyn's shoulders loosened a fraction. "Your mother had a laugh that made the halls feel larger," she said. When she came in, she grabbed my hand and said, "I'm scared, but I'm ready." I've carried that sentence for 27 years. Sophia felt the words land like a gentle stone in a quiet pond, rippling outward. "Thank you for keeping it," she said. "I'll keep it now." They parted with a small nod, the kind people share when language can't reach far enough. Nurse Patel guided Sophia back toward the elevator, pointing out the new secure doors, the scanners, the monitors that traced each newborn like a star in a night sky carefully mapped. On the street again, the air had warmed. The car carried her downtown to the Foundation. The building hummed with an energy she had come to recognize, a chorus of small tasks braided into purpose. A staffer hurried beside her as she entered. The staffer said, "We finalized the last mentorship placements for this quarter. Also, the Chicago office requested your notes on hospital outreach." Sophia replied, "Send them my annotated template and schedule a call with their clinical liaison. And make sure they have the revised safety checklist, the version with the escalation ladder." They passed a wall of framed letters, thank yous from families reunited, from kids who'd found a home. One envelope had been pinned without its contents, only the word scrawled on the front. "Finally." She touched its edge as she walked by. In the conference room, the board waited around the long table. The windows were open to spring light. The chair at the head remained empty. Sophia preferred to sit in the second seat, a visible reminder that the work was not hers alone. The board director said, "We're ready for the quarterly review." Sophia said, "Before we begin, I want to mark something. Today is 1 year since Eleanor Whitmore's memorial. We will never measure her legacy by numbers, but we will honor it with accountability." Heads bowed briefly. Pages turned. They moved through charts and budgets, case studies and outreach plans. When questions rose, Sophia answered simply and clearly, her voice steady. When someone suggested expanding too quickly, she said, "We don't grow to impress, we grow to sustain." Near the end, the director raised a final item. "There's an invitation from the State Corrections Department. They're asking if you would speak at a re-entry program graduation." Sophia looked up. "Where?" The director named the facility. It was the one where Daniel Clark taught literacy classes. The room went very still. Sophia folded her hands. "Confirm," she said. "I'll go." The announcement fell into the quiet, like a small bell. That evening, she returned to the penthouse. The city edged toward sunset, the river burning briefly with light. She set the locket on the mantel beside Amelia's photograph and whispered, "Guide me." Then she wrote a short speech at the kitchen table, crossing out sentences that rang false, keeping the ones that felt like bone. 2 days later, she passed through a series of gates that opened with reluctant clicks and closed with the certainty of iron. The auditorium was plain, rows of plastic chairs, a banner made of paper and markers. "Congratulations, graduates." Men in grey uniforms sat with folded hands, faces guarded and hopeful. A program coordinator greeted her softly. "Thank you for coming. Your name carries weight, the good kind." Sophia said, "I'm here as a person, not as a headline." She stepped to the lectern without fanfare. "I know what it means to be defined by a past you didn't choose," she began. "Some of you made choices you regret. Some of you were swallowed by other people's choices. All of you are here because you decided to learn, to change, to try. That is not small. That is not pretend. That is the hardest work." She spoke of second chances as practice, not miracle. She spoke of accountability as an act of respect, for those harmed and for the self that has to live forward. She spoke of her grandmother's final promise and the promise she had made in return, to set the armor down when it no longer protected, when it only weighed. When she finished, the room held a quiet that felt almost like reverence. The coordinator called names. Men crossed the stage and received certificates with hands that shook. When the ceremony ended, a few approached to thank her. She listened, nodded, asked for their plans, insisted on specifics. Daniel Clark stood near the back, a step removed from the crowd. Time had drawn his face inward. When he saw that she'd noticed him, he didn't move forward. He simply placed a worn paperback on the corner of a table, then took a hesitant step back, as if leaving an offering on a stone. Sophia crossed the room and picked up the book. On the title page, a sentence had been underlined, "No one is beyond the work of becoming." On the inside cover, in a neat hand, he had written, "For the person who taught me that truth without love is punishment, and love without truth is permission. Thank you for refusing both." D.C. Daniel said, "I won't ask anything from you. I only wanted you to know I heard you." Sophia met his eyes. "Then keep listening," she said. He nodded once, something exhausted and sincere moving across his face. He did not apologize again. He did not try to be forgiven. He let the moment mean only what it could mean and no more. Outside, the sky had drifted toward evening. The driver opened the car door, but Sophia paused on the steps, breathing in the clean, ordinary air. Back at the foundation that night, staff and volunteers gathered in the courtyard for the annual lantern ceremony, a ritual Eleanor had loved. Children decorated paper lanterns with names and wishes, with drawings of houses and constellations, and the peculiar animals hope invents. When dusk finally came, the lanterns lifted in careful hands, 100 small moons rising. A little girl tugged Sophia's sleeve. "Can you help me light mine?" the child asked. Sophia knelt beside her. "What did you write on it?" The girl tilted the lantern so the words showed. It said, "Find me." Then, beneath it, the smallest amendment, "You did." Sophia swallowed. "Let's send it up," she said. They lit the wick together and the lantern rose, wobbling at first, then catching a current only the night could see. Across the courtyard, a violinist began to play, a quiet melody that might have belonged to Amelia once. Sophia closed her eyes for a breath and pictured the beach from Eleanor's dream, a woman holding a child's hand, sunlight reaching everything it touched. When the ceremony ended, she walked home through streets that glowed like the inside of a memory. In the penthouse, she placed the paperback beside the locket and the photograph. The three objects, truth, love, and a way forward, sat together like a completed sentence. She called softly into the stillness, "Good night, Grandma. Good night, Mum." From the window, the city answered in its language of lights. Somewhere, a siren faded. Somewhere, a door opened and did not slam. Somewhere, a child slept without fear. Sophia turned off the lamps one by one, leaving only the mantle lit. The locket caught the last warm thread of evening and held it, a small bright arc refusing to dim. She stood there a long time, not holding on, not letting go, simply belonging. When she finally spoke, it was to the room, to the city, to anyone who might someday need the words. "The past is not a prison," she said. "It is a teacher. Learn and walk on." And because light remains where it is shared, the room did not grow darker when she left it. It seemed instead to keep its own promise, shining enough for the next step, and the next, and the next.